Welcome to the Financial Foundations Podcast, your gateway to the fascinating realm of finance, brought to you by Base Wealth Management. In this show, we delve deep into the world of money, guided by seasoned experts who will unravel the complexities of finance and provide you with invaluable insights and practical advice. Now, here are your hosts, Dustin Taylor and Kyle Howell.
Welcome back to Financial Foundations, brought to you by Base Wealth Management, where we are the foundation to your financial plan. I'm your host, Dustin Taylor.
And I'm your co-host, Kyle Howell, financial advisor with Base Wealth Management in the Lutz, Florida office.
Today we have Howard Jonas. Thank you for joining us, Howard.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Howard is in the life insurance business, and I'll let him speak for himself. Howard, can you give us a little intro on yourself and what you do?
Absolutely. So I've been in the insurance industry since 1999. For the better part of the last 26 years now, I've been in what I like to call advanced sales. So I predominantly work on cases and clients that are looking to do some wealth transfer. They have estate tax issues, and they have companies, and we're looking to do some business succession planning. And sometimes within those concepts, we utilize life insurance.
And what are we going to discuss today?
So today I want to talk about what many small to medium-sized business companies face every day is how to attract and retain top talent, how to keep these key employees at the business, how to make sure they don't say at some point in the future, it's been nice, but I'm out of here and I've got a better offer somewhere else.
So Howard, why is this a relevant topic, for small to medium-sized businesses?
So if you talk to any small to medium-sized owner or owners, aside from figuring out how they're going to pay their taxes, how to keep up revenue, how to keep expenses down, the one major challenge that they have every year is keeping their top people. We know when top people leave, it's not an immediate impact. It's a long-term impact. What do you get? How long is it going to take for that person to ramp up? What's going to be the impact on the other employees? Are they going to gel from a workflow standpoint? Are they a match from a personality standpoint? All those things go into making sure the company's top people stick around.
We're talking more along the lines of like a non-qualified plan. Are traditional qualified plans like 401ks, things like that, simple IRAs, are those not good enough to attract and retain employees in your point of view?
In my experience, typically no. You look at what a qualified plan does and who it really benefits for. Think about a qualified plan and the immediate benefit. Who obtains it? It's the business. They take a tax deduction. They're very happy. If you're an employee and you're putting money away on a pre-tax basis, you don't even see it. It doesn't go into your paycheck. So you see it there, but you can't feel it. You can't touch it. And if you're a top employee and you're making in excess of $100, $125, $175, $200,000, being able to defer $18,000, $19,000, $20,000 a year probably isn't going to put you where you want to be at retirement. So today I really want to talk about these non-qualified benefit plans. And the giant word there is non-qualified, which means it's more than likely to be used using after-tax dollars. And these plans that we're going to talk about today are all discriminatory, which is really the name of the game for attracting and retaining top talent.
Yeah, you and I have actually collaborated on, with another business owner and helping him retain a new employee coming in, right? So that's the type of plan we're going to be, discussing today.
Exactly.
How do you know what type of business to look for?
Great question. So typically I'm looking for a company, more than likely it's going to be a private company, but we could work with some public companies as well. And this is going to be a private company with probably maybe 250 employees or less. Usually companies such as these are more likely to put in these types of plans because when you have a company with less than 250 employees, more than likely you have a couple of real superstars. Think about it. If you have a company with 7,000 employees and 3 superstars leave, next man up, next woman up, next person up. But if you have a company with 250 employees and your top 3 people leave, you're going to see a negative impact immediately and for the immediate future. So I'm looking for companies, a couple hundred employees or less, that are really saying, hey, we don't want this person to walk out the door tomorrow. What can we do to make sure they stick around?
Is it just the number of employees that you consider or also the amount of revenue?
It's really the amount of employees, and One thing that is immense when I'm figuring out what the best type of plan is, how is that company taxed? Is it an S corp? Is it a C corp partnership? Many times you'll ask a business owner, how's your company taxed? I have an LLC. Great, but how's the LLC taxed? Don't be surprised if you get no, it's an LLC. The LLC is kind of unique. It has what's called check the box privileges. It can be taxed as an S corp or C corp, but the default is a partnership. How the company is taxed, in my mind, makes a humongous difference with respect to what plan I'm thinking about doing, especially if it's an S corp or a C corp. Passive versus C corp, that dictates quite a bit.
Howard, you've obviously stated 250 employees or less. Does something like this work for, say, a company with less than 50 employees?
Absolutely. Any company or any owner that if they were sitting here today and I said, if this particular employee said to you tomorrow, I'm giving you my 2 weeks, would you really feel it? And if the owner said absolutely, then it's appropriate, whether they have 250 employees or 3 employees.
I would imagine that the smaller the business with the least amount of employees is probably going to suffer more, even though 250 is a rather small number when it comes to, business. A smaller amount of employees is going to suffer more than, say, 250 to 500 employees.
Now that you bring it up, I would imagine the smaller the business, the smaller amount of employees, the bigger the impact. So the smaller the company, it might be more important for them to put one of these plans in place.
Does it matter if the company is public or private?
It does. Great question. There's a few types of non-qualified discriminatory employee benefit plans out there that only private companies can utilize. Private company basically can put in any type of plan they want, but a public company, they're limited sometimes with respect to the type of plan they can use. So great question.
I can think of a handful of clients of my own that are corporate type people making really good money, $250,000, $300,000, but don't have anything in place other than their 401k through the company. Is this something that, maybe they could go back to leadership and say, hey, is this something that we can do for me?
If you ask people in HR or the owners of companies, regardless of size, would you rather put some type of extra benefit plan in place now or have to rehire and retrain someone? They're always going to do the first thing. It's infinitely cheaper and better for the company. So if you have any top key employees right now earning in excess of what you said, they know how valuable they are. They would like to see something other than that pre-tax qualified plan. They can sit down with their manager, the supervisor, or someone in HR and say, hey, I've been evaluating different types of employee benefit plans. What's the company's appetite to implement one of these plans for me? I do have a relationship with the group. I would be happy to set something up, do an exploratory call or exploratory meeting and see where it goes.
So when we're talking about key man policies or succession planning and stuff like that, what are some of the challenges that you face when implementing these plans?
So one of the big challenges is complexity. We hear this time and time again, keep it simple, stupid. We always like to keep things simple. So some questions I like to ask the business owner, okay, I'm going to go to my laboratory. I'm going to build a discriminatory employee benefit plan on a non-qualified basis for your top 2 key people. Tell me some things that are very, very important. Would you like a current tax deduction or control? You know what I usually hear?
Really?
Everybody wants both, which makes me so happy because then there's only one type of plan out there. I'll ask another question. When designing this plan, would you like me to avoid adding a liability on the corporation's balance sheet? Another question. Would you like to avoid having to use a third-party administrator, a TPA? Things like that. So depending on how they answer, depending on the annual income of the employee, because that drives quite a bit too. If you have an employee making $100,000, really good money, but you're probably not going to put the Rolls Royce of benefit plans in place. If you have an employee making $250,000, I would imagine you're going to do whatever is humanly possible to make sure they stick around. So if you got to add a liability to your balance sheet, add a TPA. Also, how the company is taxed is a big thing. If you're a pass-through, and almost everyone listening to this would be, if you get an income tax deduction up front, you're very, very happy because then you pay less taxes. If it's not deductible, and most benefit plans are not, you still have to pay that tax liability on your K-1. So when I give a business owner control and a tax deduction, it's double Christmas.
At what point would a small business owner who has just a few employees, when would they want to start talking to you about this?
Probably once they've had any employee who's been there probably 2 years or so. In my estimation, you can't really figure out whether or not an employee is amazing at what they do and is a good fit for a couple of years. It takes some time, unless you're a ball player and you put a ball in a hoop and right away you're averaging 40 a game. But in this world, it's probably a couple of years. And then the question becomes, who's going to approach that business owner, or is the business owner actually going to seek this information out?
This type of plan, like a key man plan where you would protect yourself from something, it's whether that person leaves the company or if they pass away, or how does that work exactly?
Great question. So most of the time when I'm looking at employee benefit plans, what's in it for the employee down the line, and somewhat what's in it for the company. A true key person plan would benefit the company if that individual passed away. That's easy. The biggest challenge is if the employee were to leave, or how do we get that employee to stick around for 3, 5, 7, 10, 12 years? How do we accomplish that? There are some plans that sort of provide an upfront benefit for the company and a post-retirement or even a pre-retirement benefit for the employee. It just depends on how many dollars we want to allocate to the plan each year, and how complex we want it to be. If we want it to be truly simple, not as many moving parts and levers. But if we want to get a little complex and give benefits on both sides of the fence, employee and employer, we can do that.
If the person leaves or passes away, then the company would receive a monetary benefit. Is that accurate?
Correct. It is entirely possible to put in a plan where if the key employee passed away all of a sudden, the company receives an infusion of tax-free cash.
And they would do that. They would use that typically to help find another person, et cetera. Okay.
Correct.
So, Howard, we've been talking now for a few minutes about these different types of plans and discussing, if something happens to this key employee, whether it's, death or they leave the company. How are we funding these plans? What do these plans look like?
So many of these plans, if they're going to be funded, we typically utilize a permanent life insurance policy that can build tax-free cash, tax-free income. The reason is what I just said. They grow tax deferred. Some of these plans can be funded with any assets. Could be stocks, bonds, mutual funds, anything. Or they don't have to be funded. We can put a plan in place where the company is technically on the hook to pay X amount of dollars in the future. And the company could say, we'll have plenty of cash flow at some point down the line. We don't need to fund the plan at all. If they choose to fund the plan with mutual funds or stocks, of course, any gains the company's going to have to pay tax on. The life insurance policy is sort of a unique vehicle because you have that tax deferred growth, and then you have that sort of get out of tax-free jail card at the end. If somebody passes away too soon, you have that tax-free death benefit. But when I'm putting some of these plans in place, I really try to make sure the employee really understands what we're doing for them. It's a challenge, though. Many employees in their 30s and 40s, they can't even imagine being 60 or 70 years old. And we try to talk about the tax environment. And if you're not a business owner, what is going to be your probably primary source of income when you retire other than Social Security? It's a 401k, it's an IRA. Those are all taxable. This is a way to diversify your retirement. This is a way to provide the employee with a source of money, so to speak, that has a tax-free death benefit, doesn't have any required minimum distributions. You can add a long-term care rider, and there's always that death benefit for your family if you pass away too soon. So to me, if I can really educate the employee, they always seem to be more enthusiastic about the plan because they really understand what they have and why it's worth it then to stay at the company.
It's definitely all about the education.
So how would a company's creditors react to this type of plan?
Let's go back to one of my favorite questions for an owner. What's more important, a current tax index or control? And if the owner says, control, 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 I don't care about any type of tax deduction, okay, great. If we assume this plan is going to have a future payout at some point down the line, and the company's going to fund it. If the company funds it with anything, all those assets would potentially be subject to the corporation's creditors if there's a lawsuit. If that's an issue, if that's a concern, maybe we're working with a medical practice and the medical practice has been sued in the past. We don't want to have to worry about that. We'll design a plan that does provide some control where the assets funding that plan would not be subject to the corporation's creditors.
Would any of these plans work for the company's owner?
Most of the time, the companies we're working with or dealing with are all pass-through entities. S-corp partnership, so these plans would really not be effective. The only time some of these plans could be really interesting to the owner of a company would be if they're a C corporation. So if you're an owner of a C corporation in your 50s or younger, your spouse is in your 50s or younger, please reach out to us.
Is there ever anything, maybe from the IRS or even the SEC, FINRA, about being abusive type plans, any types of transactions that may not necessarily coincide with how they're supposed to be implemented?
So this comes up every couple of years. The IRS periodically will look at types of concepts or plans out there. Most recently, a Section 79 plan. Back in 2007, you had the Section 419 plans. Those plans became listed transactions. What does that mean in English? That means if you engage in those plans, you have to file a form with the IRS every year. You're really putting your hands up and saying, come audit me. The plans I work with are not looked at as listed transactions. In fact, one of the plans I use quite frequently is something called loan regime split dollar. And if you're not familiar with that plan, you're probably familiar with Jim Harbaugh at Michigan. He had that plan for him. Dabo Sweeney at Clemson, they had that plan for him. So all the plans that I work with small to medium-sized companies are way outside what the IRS is looking for. They're all considered what we call above board. The last thing I want to do is open anyone up to an audit, or certainly myself being deposed.
What would be some advice for financial planners, advisors like myself that do work with small to medium-sized companies?
My advice would be have a conversation with some of these owners and ask them some very point-blank questions. Do you have any employees that have been at your company for a while now, where if they walked out tomorrow, you'd want to throw yourself out the window? Because you really want to understand what they believe would be the impact. Ask them this question: I want to build a plan for your top 3 people. What's more important, a current tax deduction or control? And remind them to be realistic about it. If they put a plan in place that's going to pay out to someone in 27 years and somebody's 30, that might not be that realistic. Unless the company has a pension plan, these days people tend to jump around a lot. So I always remind people, hey, let's be realistic. If you can keep someone at a company 12, 13, 14 years, that's a pretty good time frame. 20, 25 years might be unrealistic unless you're aware of the talent pool out there. If you have a company and there's no other companies within a 100-mile radius and you're aware the talent pool is very, very small, you might say, I don't think my employees have much of a choice. But if the opposite is true, I would try to get ahead of this. It is definitely one of the concerns of small to medium-sized companies whenever there's a survey being done.
How do you determine how much how large the policy is?
Typically, when I'm going into these plans from a design standpoint, if we're going to utilize life insurance, it's an afterthought. It really comes down to what does the company want to fund this plan with each year and for how long? So, and then the whole reality thing always rears its ugly head. If a company says, I love this plan, this is great, we're going to put this in place, we're going to put $5,000 a year into it. And I would say, okay, great. Look at what the plan could be worth in the future. Would you stay at this company for that? And usually the answer is, oh, I don't think so. So I'm not saying you have to put $100,000 in, but it has to be tangible. It has to be substantial. It has to jump off the page so an employee is going to say, wow, I want that for myself when I'm 58 or 67 years old. So it's hard to quantify exactly how much, but it has to be enough to make it worth it. And everyone might have a different definition. If you have an employee making $50,000 a year and you put a plan in for $7,500 a year, might be substantial. If you have somebody making $143,000, $5,000 won't cut it. So it depends on what the benefit is now and what the benefit is later.
And then a piggyback question to that answer is from an income perspective. So if you as the business owner are putting in $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 into this type of plan, is the employee picking that up as income?
The magic question always is, do you want a tax deduction or control? If the company says, I really, really want a tax deduction up front, then the employee would have to pick that up as ordinary income today. Most of the time we do what's called a double bonus. What does that mean? That means if I have a company, I'm putting an employee benefit plan in place for someone and I want $15,000 a year to go into a policy, maybe I'll give them a bonus of $22,000. So their net after tax would be $15,000. Now it's not even going to cost me $22,000 because I, as the company, get to do what's called a gross up and I get to deduct it. So depending on what tax bracket I'm in, that $22,000 bonus could only cost the company $12,000, $13,000, or $14,000.
You mentioned that the employee could take the benefit now or later. If they took it now, but then they ended up leaving earlier, what sort of penalties are there? How does that work?
If we put together a benefit plan that provides an upfront tax deduction and some control, if the employee leaves too soon, then that control factor rears its ugly head. For instance, we could do a plan, and Kyle and I are working on this type of plan for one of Base's clients, where we have an owner that says, I have a truly key person and I don't want them to leave. I want them to stick around for 13 years. So I'm going to put a plan in place where I'm going to provide a double bonus each year, and the employee is going to own a life insurance policy. We'll call this plan a REBA plan, Restricted Executive Bonus Agreement. So the company gets a full deduction on day one for all the money they pay out. The employee picks it up as ordinary income. The employee owns the contract. The employee signs the beneficiary. The employee could even put a long-term care rider on the policy. Once that is done, the employee and the employer are going to enter into an agreement to put a restriction on the cash value of the policy. We're going to pay into this policy for 12 years. This restriction is going to sit with the carrier for 12 years. If the employee leaves in 6 years, well, two things are going to happen. The company's going to stop paying the premium because the employee's gone, and the employee is either going to have to continue to make the premium payments, or they're stuck looking at that cash value for the next 6 years, and it's probably going to go down because we designed the policy in such a way where you have to make premium payments the first 12 years. It's another great way to incentivize the employee to stick around. We want to say to the employee, this is a great plan. Benefit today, benefit tomorrow. However, if you leave too soon, it's very possible if you don't start contributing to this plan, you would have recognized tax on an asset ultimately worth zero.
Is it possible to do this on a contractor? I'm assuming no, but
Absolutely. So REBA plan works great for 1099 employees because it's an additional bonus. There's some other types of plans out there. Just remember, these are all discriminatory plans and non-qualified plans, so you pick and choose whom you want to do it for. We all love the qualified plans, but you can't discriminate. Any full-time employee working over 1,000 hours a year has to be included in the plan. Periodically, I get an owner that says, well, I've got 3 companies. The other 2 companies I have no employees. Can I do those plans for just my spouse and I? So I'd love to help you out with that, but there's something called the control group issue, control group rules. If you are more than 50% of an owner of any company and you put a qualified plan for any other company you own, you have to include all the employees. So all these plans today are completely discriminatory, which really gives us, a blank piece of paper when it comes to developing the plan.
How does this type of plan differ from a deferred compensation plan like a 401k?
I get this question forever. Howard, I want to put together a non-qualified deferred compensation plan. My first response is, great, who's taking the pay cut? And usually there's, whoa, nobody wants a pay cut. That's what deferred compensation is. You're deferring compensation for another day. So you have an employee making $272,000. They're getting killed in taxes. They want to defer way more than their 401k allows them to. So they'll defer $100,000. So they might go in a lower tax bracket. But this is one of the most complex plans out there. What the company is really doing is providing a really fancy IOU to the employee. IOU, whatever you're deferring each year, plus some extra interest. So now the company's put a giant tax liability on their balance sheet. You have to use a third-party administrator. It's a promise to pay. Now, it gets interesting if the company runs into financial difficulties, because then the employee in year 6 says, okay, I've got a better offer. I'm moving to Tahiti. I want my money. Well, we can't pay you. That's a problem. All these plans are also subject to something what's known as Internal Revenue Code 409A. What does that mean in English? That means there's really no flexibility in these plans unless there's death, disability, or financial hardship. So those can be amazing plans, but you always have to ask yourself, put yourself in the employee's situation. Could they defer another $25,000, $50,000, $75,000? These days, probably not. Now, if you're lucky enough to work with a company where they have employees making $450,000, $500,000, and they could defer $100,000, that's great. We can we can implement one of these plans. But if most of your employees are making $175,000 or less, I would imagine they probably won't want to defer $50,000, $75,000. And I started at 50 because if someone says, I want to defer an extra 10,000, it probably doesn't make sense to implement one of these plans. They're just too complex.
Do you have any advice for business owners that are looking to recognize top talent?
Sure. So in my mind, there's really two sides of the fence, the people that you have now and the people that you want in the future. If you're looking to attract top talent, I would definitely find out about these plans any way you can, because these plans could really separate your company from the multitude of other companies out there. You look at most job descriptions, what type of benefits are offered. Of course, health insurance, life insurance, 401k match, but that's it. I think you want to attract top talent. You can really separate yourself by saying to potential employees, this is a great place to work for. Yes, you have all the traditional benefits. However, we have a relationship with an entity, and the entity has an employee benefit planning specialist. All they do is build plans for people like you. And we have these plans. They're here. We want you to take part in these plans.
So Howard, I know you've mentioned this a handful of times, about attracting top talent. Is there anything that we can add to that?
So if you're a small to medium-sized company and you're listening to this podcast and you want to really separate yourself from other companies out there by way of attracting and keeping top people, reach out to Base. Let them know you have a situation where either you have key people right now that you want to make sure they don't leave, or you're actively looking for top people and you want to create a secondary or discriminatory benefit plan that's really going to separate their company from all the other companies out there.
So there you have it. If you are a small business owner who is looking to protect your business, then you can reach out to Kyle, who will put you into contact with Howard and go from there. If you'd like any more additional information on your finances, financial planning, etc., be sure to visit our website at basewealthmanagement.com. There are podcasts, YouTube videos, and articles there for you to consume.
Be sure to follow this podcast on all your favorite social media entities. And if you have any questions, send them to question@basewealthmanagement.com.
Thanks for joining us, Howard.
Thanks for having me. This was great.
I'm Dustin Taylor.
And I'm Kyle Howell.
Happy listening.
We hope the expertise shared by our hosts, Dustin Taylor and Kyle Howell, has left you feeling empowered and informed. If you're eager for more financial wisdom, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and share the show with your friends, family, and colleagues. Until next time, stay sharp in the world of finance.